Today we're going to discuss about how to program and interrogate Abbott ICDs. So, you know, the guidelines for St. Jude Medical Abbott. If I had to summarize, you see here what is advice for the programming in patient in primary prevention, so patients with no VT history. And you see two zones are supposed to be programmed. The first one is the VT2, starting at 187 beats per minute with 30 intervals. And the VF zone is quite high, since it's supposed to be programmed at 250 beats per minute with also 30 intervals. Okay, that's much more. That's what is in the nominal programming. Okay, so that's the primary prevention. In secondary prevention, you can have a second VT zone according to the rate of the clinical tachycardia. Something also important, and we're going to discuss about it today, this one, the secure sense RV noise discrimination should be systematically programmed on. And I will try to explain why I think it's a really good idea to program this algorithm on. So, we're going to start now. This is a tracing recorded as an episode of VF in an ICD. It's an Abbott. And please, can you explain to me how it will work? Leah, you there? So really the way it works the counters in Abbott ICD, and even the way you will classify every cycles is really different compared to all the other manufacturers. So explain to me what you see here. So it's a dual chamber ICD.
Yes.
Okay. Two channels. This is the atrial channel. This is the ventricular bipolar channel, the markers. What do you see here?
So the first, so we can see here A based and ventricular sensed.
Yes, but what do you see here? You see the numbers, and what is this here?
Yes, we can see the relative and absolute refractory periods for both atrias and ventricles.
Yes, the thick lines are the blankings. So you see atrial pacing, there is a blanking here. And then after ventricular sensing at the level of the atrium, there is another blanking. Mm-hmm. And then the thin lines are here, it's for example the PVARP, okay? And here this is for the ventricle, and you see the blanking post-sensing. The only blanking, I don't know for any reason, you don't see here is the ventricular blanking after atrial pacing. When you pace the atrium here, there is a blanking here. But yes, this is the only one that you cannot see on the tracing. But that can help sometimes to understand the tracing. And you see, for example, if a signal falls inside a blanking or inside a PVARP, for example. Okay? Okay, now you see here, atrial pacing, ventricular sensing, it's probably a PVC, atrial pacing. What happens then?
After then, we can see the beginning of a ventricular tachycardia.
Yes, yeah.
With some different markers at the beginning of the arrhythmia.
Yes, explain this one.
So in Abbott devices, the classification of the intervals depend on the mean value of the 4 lost cycles.
Yeah.
And
yep. So what does it mean, this cycle?
These cycles, it means that it's like in transition. It means that the mean value of the 4 last cycles are different. This cycle is different from the mean value of the last 4 cycles. It means that maybe it's faster than the mean value.
Yep, exactly. This is a major difference compared to all the other manufacturers. In all the other one, a cycle is classified according to the current interval. That's true for Medtronic, Biotronic, Microport, or Boston. Here, as you said, that's completely different, since all the time you will classify the current interval compares to the mean value of the last four. So this one, this one, this one, and this one. And if, like in this example, you see there is a discordance between the current interval and the last four, then you will have this sign explaining that this cycle is not classified, unclassified, or is considered as a transition. Okay, so to be clear, this cycle corresponds to the VF zone, you know, here, but the mean value, the average value of the last four cycle compares still to the slow zone, to VS. So since there is a discordance between the current interval and the average value of the last four, then the signal is classified as in transition, or you can say non-classified. Okay, so this one now.
So this one is classified as a VF cycle because it belongs to the same zone as
the average value of the last four.
Yeah.
Now there is a concordance. This interval is fast, and the average value of these four is also fast. So there is a concordance. Therefore, the cycle is classified here in the VF zone. Okay. Okay. So that's very, very, very important to understand. For most of the tachycardia, the very first cycles are unclassified, and then when there is a constant acceleration, then the first cycle will be classical F. Okay, so then what happens?
And then we have an implementation of the counters.
Yes, the VF counter for every cycle will be implemented, and I will explain on the next tracing how it will work. But you see, the VF counter is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And here, it's not seen on the tracing, but what is written here is VF detection. Okay, so the detection of an episode of VF. Okay, what is DDI here?
DDI means that it commutes to DDI mode.
Yes, there is a tachy mode. When you program the St. Jude ICD, you will program the mode, classical, and then a tachy mode, which is one after 3 cycles of tachycardia, it will switch automatically to this mode. So it's DDI. The idea is not to track natural sensing with ventricular pacing during the tachycardia. So you will systematically switch to DDI. And then there is a post-shock mode also that you can program. Okay. So what are these signs here? You see X and this one?
They represent the discrimination symbols.
Yes, this is the discrimination based on the morphology of the signals.
Yeah.
This one says, okay, this sign traduces a high percentage of similarity with the reference. So it is supposed to be similar compared to the reference. And this sign explains that this is different. And you see these are low percentages. So this tracing is a quite old tracing. This explains why there are only 12 cycles in the initial detection. You know now that nominally we program at minimum 30 cycles for initial detection. And also, this is an old device, and therefore the discrimination based on the morphology has been consistently modified in the new platforms. And you see example here. On the old ones, the functioning of the morphology was not so good. And you see, for example, that there is a relation with the reference, and it's obviously different, and this is obviously a tachycardia. But when we will discuss about the discrimination, I will explain to you how it works now for the morphology, and it has been consistently modified. Okay, so if come back to the counters, detection of the VF. So what happens then?
Then we see that the device is charging
Yes.
the little stars.
Yes, you see the stars here explaining that you are charging the capacitors, diagnosis of VF, charge of the capacitors. And then what happens?
And then we have spontaneous reduction.
Yes, there is a spontaneous reduction without delivery of any shock. And what is this here?
We have a return to sinus because the counter of sinus return is
on 3, you see?
3, yeah. 3.
There is a counter for the return to sinus. All the time during a tachycardia, there is a competition between the tachycardia counters and the counter of return to sinus. I will explain to you how it works on the next tracing, the counters, but this is something that you can, and this is probably the most important parameters to program in an Abbott ICD. Okay? You can hear me now?
Yes.
Léa?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Je regrette, je n'ai pas de réponse à cela. Est-ce que je peux vous aider pour autre chose?
Hello?
Léa?
Yes, yes. Hello?
Que souhaitez-vous savoir concernant les Abenabou?
Hello?
Désolé, je ne peux pas faire cela.
Léa, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, yes. Hello.
Sorry. So this is the parameters that you can program. You can program either to 3, 5, or 7. Okay, the return to sinus. And the way it works, you see for the VF, and I will explain it, you don't need consecutive cycles classify VF. But for the return to sinus, you can program either 3, 5, or 7. So the counter of return to sinus is going to be 1, 2, and 3. But if there is in between these two cycles, let's consider this one is VS and then VS, and this one, for example, would be VF or VT, then the return to sinus counter will be reset to 0. If there's 1, 2, and then 1 VT or VF, then the return to sinus is reset to 0. Okay, that's clear? So if I summarize, these parameters is very, very, very important, and I will explain why to program. And the major thing to understand is that for an Abbott ICDs, you will always compare the current interval with the average value of the 4 previous cycles. Okay? So now, what do you think here? This is a CRT device. Then what happens?
There's a PVC maybe.
Yes, probably, and an arrhythmia, okay?
Yeah.
So all the time, the very first cycle, these are non-classified or classified in transition, just the same, because this interval is short, but the average value is slow. Okay, so now you see markers, you can program 1 VF zone and 2 fast VT, 1 fast VT and 1 slow VT. So fast VT is going to be T2 and slow VT is going to be T1. So how does it work now, the counters?
So they are independent, T1 and
They
T2?
are completely independent. So let's count for the T1. The counter is going to be at how much here? 1,
2, 2.
Yes, terminal 2.
2, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6, 7. Okay. Now for the T2. T2 here.
0, 0,
0, 1,
1,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so as you say, the counters are completely independent. It means that a T1 will not decrement the T2, and the T2 will not implement the T1. Okay, the same for the unclassified cycles. You could have also 1 VS. Huh? If there is no return to sinus, then all the time the counter will be implemented if there is a T1. Okay, so you don't need consecutive cycles. Okay, the counter is going to be yes, this one for T1, but also this one, this one, this one. Okay, they are completely independent. That's clear. Okay. So what do you think here?
We can see ventricular fibrillation, maybe.
Yes. What is this here? Fiber DC.
It's an induction.
Yes, that's an induction at the end of the implantation. DC is direct current. You will pace with the coil with high amplitude pacing, 8 volts, 2 milliseconds, with very fast pacing, and then you can induce an arrhythmia. Okay. So what happens then? All the time, at the onset of the tachycardia, the first cycles are unclassified because the current intervals are fast, but the average value is still slow. And then one cycle is classified F. What happens here?
We can clearly see that there's an undersensing.
There is an undersensing, explaining that this could be a transition for the device. You're fast here, and then you're slow. So that's a transition between fast and slow. So that's why this one is unclassified. Okay? But as you say, this corresponds to a cycle which is undersense. Okay? And then?
But fortunately, the counters of VF
yes, are implemented. Yes, new detection. So the VF counter is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So once more, this is an old device, but you see that there is quite undersensing, but there is not even one cycle which is classified as VS. Okay, because of the way you are analyzing each cycles, comparing the current interval with the average value of the 4 previous one, even when there is undersensing, there is no cycle classified as VS. Okay, and that's the same after that. Okay, so this is the reason why this manufacturer has chosen the way of labelization of the cycles. Okay, with this, when you compare the current interval with the average value, the idea is to say, okay, what I want is 100% of sensitivity in case of VF. Okay, and therefore, even if there is undersensing, I want my device to correctly detect an episode of ventricular fibrillation and deliver a shock. And that's the reason why they have chosen this way of classifying the cycle, to avoid the risk of non-therapy in case of undersensing during ventricular fibrillation. You understand?
Yes.
And that's the reason why when there is a patient, for example, with not so good quality of sensing, all the time I will consider an Abbott ICD, because the way they are classifying the cycles has been designed to avoid, to at least to decrease the risk on non-treating ventricular fibrillation in case of undersensing. Okay, that's the main advantage of the way they count. Okay, that's clear.
Yes.
Yes, and at the end, the shock here is delivered. But that can be an advantage, but that can be also a limitation. So explain to me, what do you think about this tracing?
We can see an oversensing.
Yes. What is the rhythm here?
The rhythm is slow VT.
Yes, you see, this is the atrial channel, this is the ventricular channel. There are more ventricles than atrium. Okay, so that there is a dissociation. That's clearly that's a VT, and as you said, it's a quite slow VT. The slow VT is terrible to treat because the medicine does not work so well. The ablation many times is not so efficient, and for an IC that can be a nightmare. But what is specifically, so that's a slow VT, and what happens here?
We have an oversensing with a double counting of
the R wave.
The R wave, yeah.
Yes, that's the double counting of the R wave. You see, in slow VTs, many times you have very wide QRS and you have very wide cycles, and there is a risk of here double counting of the R wave. Which parameters you need to program to avoid the double counting of the R wave?
In which the ventricular blink.
Yes, the post-sensing ventricular blanking. Is this a parameter that you can program?
Not. We can program it. 125 or 157.
Yes, for Abbott, this is a parameter that you can program. You have two choices: 125, that's the case here, or 157. Okay, when you program this parameter, that's the limit for sensing a real arrhythmia also. So that's why you cannot program it very long. Okay, you cannot program a blanking of 200 milliseconds, for example, because if you program like this, you cannot sense episode of tachycardia faster than 300 beats per minute. So in Abbott, you have two choices. You can program it in Medtronic also. It's nominally on 120 in Medtronic, but you can program it up to 170 milliseconds.
Yes.
You can program it in Biotronic, but you need a code. It's only people from Biotronic. If you can ask them, they have a code, and then you can modify this parameter. And you cannot reprogram it in Boston and in Microport. There's no access for programming to this parameter. So that's the thing you could program. But you see here, how will it work the counter for the VF? It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there is clearly a very long cycle and a long, short, long, short, long, short. For all the other competitors, this episode will not be treated. If you require, for example, like in Medtronic, 75% of fast cycles in the VF zone, then you will not, the counter will not be filled. You understand that?
Yes.
And this is the only company where, with this kind of problem, at the end, you could receive an inappropriate shock. So, first of all, if you consider T-wave sensing, R-wave double counting, in some company, there are episodes like this, and in some company, there are not. For example, for the T-wave sensing, for different reasons, you will never see it in Boston devices, but you will see it in Abbott or in Medtronic devices. For example, Biotronic has completely corrected the problem of T-wave sensing, nearly completely corrected the problem of T-wave sensing in the new platforms, but you still see some T-wave sensing in Abbott or in Medtronic. The problem of double counting of the R-wave was very frequent in the old platforms in Biotronic because the blanking was very short. But what you need to understand is that not only in Abbott, you could have problem of oversensing, but this was the manufacturer with the higher risk of inappropriate therapy in these cases. Okay, if there is double counting of the R wave in Medtronic devices, most of the time you will not receive inappropriate therapy. But because of the way you are counting and you are analyzing every cycles, there was an increased risk of inappropriate therapy in case of double counting of the R wave in Abbott devices, because there is a latency before the return to sinus rhythm. You understand? This is the only company where this problem could be at the end finished with an inappropriate therapy. Is this clear? Because of the way you're counting, you see, this cycle is long, but is considered as unclassified because this is long, but the average value of this plus this plus this plus this is still in a zone of tachycardia. You understand? Mm-hmm. So it's considered as unclassified, and therefore you will not deplement the VF counter, and it will be implemented, and then at the end, the patients receive an inappropriate therapy. Okay, any question on that? That's something very, very, very important. Once more, the way you are classifying every cycle has been done to decrease the risk of no therapy in case of VF, in case of undersensing. That's the main reason of why this has been developed like this. The problem is that with this kind of classifying cycles, you increase the risk of inappropriate therapy in case of oversensing. Okay, so really this kind of devices needed something else to decrease the amount of inappropriate therapy. Okay, so this is a new tracing. What do you think now? Okay, sorry. Okay, let's start with this. What do you think?
We can see the beginning of an arrhythmia.
This is a single lead
Yes, single lead ICD.
bipolar. This is the discrimination channel. What is the discrimination channel?
The discrimination channel is an unipolar channel.
Used for the discrimination based on the morphology. Okay. What are the two choices? You say it's a unipolar. You can reprogram it if you want. What are the two options?
The coil toucan.
Yep.
And the tip toucan.
Yes, the tip toucan or the coil toucan. Yes, good. So you will base the discrimination now. That's different. That's what I have tried to explain. For the discrimination, now you use this discrimination, and I think it has consistently improved the quality of the morphology analysis in the new platforms of Abbott. But what is this now? What you see here, the marker VS2?
The VS2 is the secure sense
yes
algorithm.
Yes, there is, and you will use the same channel. So now I've shown you, in the guidelines, you should program the secure sense on systematically, and I really believe that's a good idea. And you will use the same channel that for the discrimination. What was the reason for the development of this algorithm initially?
It's to prevent inappropriate shock on noise.
Yes, on lead noise. Okay, so now, and I will try to explain without entering too much into the details, but I will try to explain how it works. This channel. You see the marker VS2. VS2 does not mean that there are two VS, but it's that you sense one cycle in the second channel of analysis. Okay, in the discrimination channel. Something important in this channel. You will sense now in the discrimination channel. So that's quite a revolution for the ICD, because initially the only sensing channel was the bipolar one. But now you will sense also on the discrimination. And something important, anytime you're going to sense one signal, there's going to be one marker, VS2. So there's no different marker for VF zone, VT zone, or VS in this channel. Any cycle will be classified VS2 if it is slow or if it is fast. Okay, that's clear. So the idea is to say, okay, now I will introduce what is called a noise channel, a noise counter. The idea is to say in a lead dysfunction, and I will show you tracing just after, you may have some fast cycles in the bipolar channel, but no fast cycles in the discrimination channel. And therefore, there's going to be a discordance between these two channels. If there is noise on this one and no noise on this one, you will have a tachycardia on this one, but no tachycardia on this one. In contrary, if there is an arrhythmia, you will have fast cycles in the bipolar channel, like here, F, but also fast cycle in the discrimination channel. So if the two channels are concordant, it means that this is a real arrhythmia. In an arrhythmia, you will find fast cycle here and fast cycle here. So anytime you're going to have a fast cycle inside the bipolar channel, you will implement the noise counter. But if there are also fast cycles in the discrimination channel, then the noise counter will be reset to 0. Okay, anytime you're going to have two cycles which are considered fast inside the discrimination channel, the noise counter will be reset to 0. Okay, at the time of diagnosis, when the VF counter is full, there is analysis of the noise counter, and If the noise counter is less than 10, I will not give you all the details once more, then you will say, okay, there is not a high value for the noise counter. That's a real arrhythmia. I will deliver the therapy. Okay? And in this case, FV, ATP, and at the end, the shock. Okay? So let's have a look to this one now. You see, this episode has been classified as lead noise. And now it has been modified in the new platforms. It's now oversensing, ventricular oversensing. What do you think about this tracing?
We can see on
these markers correspond to this channel. Okay, this is the bipolar. Okay, and what do you think?
We have fast signals on the bipolar channels that are not seen in the discrimination channel.
Yeah, so this is clearly non-physiological. You understand? You agree?
Yes.
What is this according to you?
Some external interference, maybe, or maybe it's a sign of a lead.
Yeah, for the interference, I think that there should be some signal here, but also
here. So
that's not a rule, but most of the time that's the case. Here you see very fast polymorphic signals. It really looks like that could be also the scalpel. You see electrical scalpel. I don't know the word in English, but it will be also present here. Okay, so that's not the case. So that's clearly and in favor of a lead dysfunction here. Okay, probably that's the case in this patient. But you see, there is false tachycardia in the bipolar channel, and then you will implement the VF counter. You see how it works? It's going to be 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. You see, there is no return to sinus here since there are only 2 VS. Therefore, you will still implement the VF counter 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so now the VF counter is full, and then there is analysis of the noise counter. So to open the noise counter, you need at least 2 out of 3 fast cycles here. Whatever, I don't give you the details, but what you see here is a false tachycardia. But now, if you have a look to the discrimination channel, you see there is no noise here, at least no oversensing. Therefore, you fast here, but you slow on the discrimination. There is a discordance between these 2 channels. Okay, so anytime you're going to have a fast cycle, you will implement systematically the noise counter. It's going to be 1, 2. This one is short also, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so let's consider you are 16 here, and you never reset to 0 because there is no fast cycle on the discrimination channel. Okay, so dissociation, discordance between this channel with fast cycles and this one without. So once the counter is full, see, then there is an analysis of the noise counter. The value is at least 10 or more. Therefore, the therapy will be inhibited. Okay, so that's a strong algorithm, because if there is a diagnosis of lead noise, no therapy will be delivered. So it will inhibit. So that's important because it works in the VT zone, but also in the VF zone. So you need really to have good results here. And I think that this algorithm is really working well. We have worked quite a lot on this with a few publications demonstrating that I think it works, yes, pretty well in this case. Okay, so with this, in case of noise, no therapy is delivered. The therapy are inhibited, and then there's going to be alerts in remote monitoring and a notification with a vibration for the patient. Okay, so because the idea is to avoid inappropriate therapy and then to alert, and then the patient needs to come to the center, because if the lead is broken, you cannot wait too much, because at the end even with this algorithm, if you wait for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, at the end, you will receive inappropriate shock because there's going to be noise also on the discrimination channel, okay? So the idea is I differentiate a real arrhythmia compared to the noise because there is discordance between this channel and this one in case of noise, okay? When there is a tachycardia here and here, if this is a real arrhythmia, the idea is to inhibit the therapy and then to alert the center and alert the patients. Okay, and this algorithm, I think, really is working really, really well to avoid inappropriate therapy. Okay, any question? Nope. What do you think here?
We can see this is a single lead ICD, and there are some ventricular undersensing that leads to return to sinus. There's one.
So you will say.
Well, no. So no, this is maybe this. There's a sharp and there's a smooth.
Yes, this one is sharp, smooth.
Yeah,
you see at least one every.
Yeah.
There is one very stable.
Okay, so no, there's maybe an oversensing of the T wave.
Yes, that's probably that's the case here. That's the problem of the T wave sensing. There is a sharp signals and a smooth. This is probably the R wave, the T wave. The T wave is pretty stable. But what do you see here? You know, there are variation in the amplitude of the R wave. Yeah. And you see when there is a quite important R wave, the same T wave is not sensed. But when the R wave is small, then you will sense the T wave, because anytime you will readapt the level of sensitivity compares to the R wave that you measure. Okay. Okay. So what's the problem here? There is a problem of T wave sensing, but which is the reason for that?
The reason for the T wave oversensing is the sensitivity, the ventricular, the sensitivity.
Quality of the R wave. You see, anytime you need to understand that when you have a look to this, the impression that you have is that this R wave is of quite high amplitude. Okay. You don't understand easily and visually that these R waves are very small, but it depends on the calibration. You see, it's 6.7 millimeters. Okay, so if you move and change the calibration, now it's 1 millimeter by millivolt, then you understand the problem. Okay, so all the time you need to think about there is a possibility of changing the calibration. This is an automatic calibration. The idea for the tracing is to show you at best all the signals. Okay, so if they are very small, then you will have the possibility, let's say, to increase artificially the amplitude of the signal. You understand that? So now if you come back to 1 millimeter by 1 millivolt, then you understand the problem. The problem is the problem of the small amplitude of the R wave. Okay, so this one, you had the impression that it was quite high. This is the same tracing, but just changing the calibration. You see, it was not so high. In fact, it's quite small. And the reason for T wave sensing is the problem of, in fact, small R wave. Okay, and what I want to demonstrate is that the secure sense was also very important to decrease the number of inappropriate therapy. Of course, in case of lead oversensing, lead noise, but also in case of, for example, T wave oversensing. So what do you think here?
We see here some
So vSense amp is this is the channel on which works really the defibrillator. Okay.
You see T-wave oversensing in the.
There is clearly T-wave oversensing. You see here. Okay.
Yes.
T-wave oversensing.
That's not seen in the discrimination channel.
Yeah. But you see that it's not so frequent, the T-wave oversensing.
Yeah.
And therefore, you do not causally implement the tachycardia counters. You see, there is T-wave sensing, but without implementing the counter of VT or VF, because the T-wave sensing is quite infrequent, in fact. And here there is a diagnosis of non-sustained oversensing. So that's a specificity also, something very important to understand. As I explained before, if you program the secure sense on, then anytime you will feel any counter of VT or VF, then there's going to be an analysis of the noise counter. And if there is a suspicion of noise, no therapy will be delivered. But there is also this, which is non-sustained oversensing. It means that even if there is no implementation of the VT counter or VF counter, in this case, for example, you will never feel the VT or VF counter, at least if it remains the same, okay? But there is an analysis of the noise counter. For example, here, this is a short cycle. Anytime your noise counter will reach the value of 10, then there's going to be recalling of what is called a non-sustained oversensing. That's clear?
Yes.
So now, and that's the same in case of lead dysfunction. Anytime you have short cycles, even if they are not consecutive, if you open the noise counter, then the device may record some tracing with very infrequent episode of short cycles, one short and then 10 cycles after another short or something like that. So even if there is a very infrequent problem, noise in case of lead dysfunction or T-wave and frequent oversensing, you will never feel the counter of VT or VF, but you will have a recorded episode inside the memory of the device of non-sustained ventricular oversensing. And you see that that's not a problem of lead dysfunction here. That's a problem of T-wave oversensing. That's why the labelization has been modified in the new platform. Now, it's not written lead noise oversensing, it's written non-sustained ventricular oversensing, because we have seen that in many cases, when there is a recorded episode of secure sense, it's not a problem of lead. It may be, for example, like here, a problem of T-wave oversensing. Okay, and this algorithm works really well for very early diagnosis of T-wave oversensing or lead dysfunction. And you can imagine, for example, let's consider in this case, you see, in the discrimination channel, there is no T-wave oversensing. You know that to see T-wave oversensing, you need very specific condition in terms of R wave and T waves. But now, for a therapy, an inappropriate therapy to be delivered in case of T-wave oversensing, you need to have T-wave oversensing in both the channels, in the bipolar channel, but also in the discrimination channel. And if your discrimination channel is, for example, between the coil and the can, it's very unlikely that the condition to obtain T-wave oversensing are exactly the same in the two channels at the same time. You understand? So the probability of receiving inappropriate therapy in T-wave oversensing with this algorithm is nearly, I think, like 0%. We have never seen now with this algorithm one case of inappropriate therapy in case of T-wave oversensing, because to be treated now, you need to have T-wave oversensing at the same time in this channel and this channel. And most of the time, the conditions are really different in terms of R wave and T wave and ratio between R wave and T wave. And you need to have simultaneous T-wave oversensing in both channels to receive an inappropriate therapy. Okay. And I think that's clearly a major advantage of this and this secure sense algorithm. Okay. Are there any questions? what I wanted to explain is that the way you are classifying the cycles in Abbott is completely different compared to all the other ones. In these devices, you always compare the current interval and the average value. Okay, so that's a major difference. The major advantage is that I think this is the company where the risk of not treating a VF because of undersensing is the lowest compared to all the other ones. But the problem was that in case of oversensing, that was the other way around, the risk of being inappropriately treated in case of oversensing was consistently increased in Abbott devices. So you need to have a solution. And I think that the Secure Sense is a very good one, at least in case of lead dysfunction or in case of T-wave oversensing. That's probably not the case in case of P-wave, so atrial oversensing. So if you oversense the atrium inside the ventricle, most of the time, if your discrimination channel is on coil to CAN, most of the time, if you have P-wave oversensing with bipolar, you also have P-wave oversensing with the coil to CAN, and therefore the risk of inappropriate therapy is still there because you will have a false tachycardia in the bipolar, but also in the discrimination channel. Okay? Are there any questions? That's the basics of how it works. Okay? So I think if there is no questions, nope. I think no teaching course next week, but we will restart in early January. I don't know when, but the first Monday of January, we can restart the courses and we will finish, I think. It's going to be the 2nd of January, same time, same place. And I think we're going to finish the tracing with Abbott devices. Okay? See you and have a nice holidays. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Merci.